The curtain would rise in 40 seconds. The spotlight found her first. She never heard the footsteps behind her. 2 hands slammed flat between her shoulder blades, deliberate, precise, vicious, and Nova flew forward onto the stage. She hit the polished wood on her hands and knees, sliding several inches, the impact cracking through both palms and her right knee. The curtain was already rising. The gasp from the audience was immediate and collective. 2,000 people reaching for the same breath at once. The lights were blinding. She was on the floor, in front of everyone. She was up in 3 seconds. Muscle memory and pride working together, pushing her upright before her mind had fully caught up. But 3 seconds under a spotlight with 2,000 eyes watching was an eternity, and she felt every millisecond of it on her skin. She turned. Adiz stood just inside the wings, her chin lifted, her expression arranged into something that might have looked like shock to anyone who did not know her. But Nova knew her. She knew that face. She knew the way Adiz's eyes went flat when she was performing an emotion rather than feeling it. Standing 2 steps to Adiz's left was Soo-yeon, a Korean ballerina who had maintained careful neutrality with Nova for months. Soo-yeon was looking at the floor. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She said nothing, not a single word. The orchestra had paused, the conductor frozen with his baton raised. The audience murmured. Somewhere in the front rows a voice carried through the extraordinary acoustics of the Sejong Center. In Korean, barely a whisper but loud enough. She fell. Not she was pushed. Simply she fell. As if her body had failed her. As if she were the problem. Nova pressed her lips together. She smoothed the front of her deep wine-red costume with both palms. She lifted her chin until her eyes were level with the back of the auditorium. And then, without knowing why, her gaze moved to the left side of the orchestra level, to a man in the 4th row who had not moved. Everyone else was leaning forward, murmuring, craning to see. The whole room was restless with the energy of unexpected drama. But this man was completely still, one arm resting along the back of the empty seat beside him, the other hand loose in his lap. Dark suit, dark hair, a posture so composed it seemed almost architectural. He was not looking at Adiz. He was not looking at the conductor or the crowd or any of the 100 competing details in the room. He was looking at her, and the expression on his face, even at this distance, even through the blinding stage lights, was not pity, not amusement, not the polite discomfort of a stranger watching someone else's humiliation. It was something colder, something that felt, in the strangest way, like the moment before a decision is made. Nova looked away. She gave the conductor a single nod. The orchestra lifted their instruments, and Nova danced. If you enjoy stories like this, you are in the right place. Take a second to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Now let's continue. She danced better than she had ever danced in her life. She had expected the fall to fracture her. Instead it sharpened her, the humiliation becoming fuel, the watching eyes becoming walls she could push against, the pain in her knee making her more precise rather than less. By the time she reached her central solo, the auditorium had gone from the loaded, uncomfortable silence of people watching a disaster to the held-breath silence of people watching something they do not want to end. She held them for every second of it. When the final note landed and she dropped into her closing position, one arm extended, the other curved against her body, chin angled down. The applause broke before the music had fully stopped. Immediate and overwhelming. The kind that moves on instinct before the social cue has registered. She bowed once, precise and formal. She walked off stage. Adiz was no longer in the wings. The dressing room had the careful, practiced silence of people who had agreed collectively not to mention what had happened. Nova sat at her mirror and removed her stage makeup with the methodical efficiency of someone who has decided not to give other people's choices more space than they deserve inside her head. Soo-yeon came in 20 minutes later and sat 3 stations down without looking at Nova. "You saw," Nova said. Not an accusation. A statement, placed between them simply, like an object set on a table. Soo-yeon's hands stilled in her hair. "You were standing right there," Nova said. "And you said nothing." "I don't want any trouble," Soo-yeon whispered. "I know," Nova said. She turned back to her mirror. "I know you don't." She packed her bag. She followed a junior assistant upstairs to Mr. Choi's office, where the artistic director sat behind his desk with the expression of a man who has been told what to say and does not entirely agree with it. The wing camera footage, he told her, was inconclusive. The angle did not clearly capture the moments before the incident. Adiz described it as an accidental collision. Suyun corroborated her account. Nova listened to all of it without interrupting. I hope, Mr. Choi started, when he had finished. I understand, Nova said. Quietly. Finally. Closing the door on whatever he had been about to offer. She walked out of the building and stood on the pavement in the cool Seoul night and breathed. She did not see the black car parked across the street. She did not see the man inside it, or the way his eyes tracked her the moment she stepped through the stage door, or the small precise movement he made. Not quite a gesture, more like a decision settling into his body. When he saw her standing alone on that pavement with her bag on her shoulder and 3 years of work balanced on her spine like it had always lived there. She simply breathed, and then she started walking toward the subway. Behind her, the black car did not move, but it did not leave either. She was in studio for the next morning at 7, an hour before anyone else arrived. She started at the bar, moved through her plies with the patient thoroughness of someone who knows the fundamentals are not a warm-up but a conversation, and worked through the stiffness in her knee with the focused attention of someone who has learned to treat pain as information rather than obstacle. She was midway through the central solo when the door opened. A broad-shouldered man in a dark coat stood in the doorway. He had the specific stillness in his face that comes not from calm, but from training. He looked at her without expression. Miss Nova. In English, not Korean. Yes. My employer would like to speak with you. Who is your employer? A brief pause. His name is Noah. He was at the performance last night. Nova looked at him. Then at the open door behind him, the ordinary empty corridor beyond. Tell your employer, she said, that if he wants to speak with me, he can come here. The man blinked. A very small blink. The kind that happens when someone has delivered a message to many people, and not one of them has ever responded this way. He excused himself and left. Nova went back to her solo. 3 minutes later she heard different footsteps. Heavier, more deliberate. The footsteps of someone who does not hurry because he has never needed to. She finished her sequence before she turned around. The man in the doorway was the one from the 4th row. Up close he resolved into details she had not been able to see from the stage. The clean line of his jaw, dark hair pushed back from his forehead. A suit that was expensive in the way that truly expensive things are. Not loud but exact. His eyes were dark and very calm, and they held the same quality of assessment she had caught from a distance the night before. Not cold, not warm, but somewhere between that required its own category. He stepped inside. He stopped several feet away, far enough that the distance was deliberate. You should not have gone back on stage last night, he said. Nova looked at him. Good morning to you too, she said. Something shifted briefly in his eyes. Good morning, he said. Why shouldn't I have gone back, she said. Because it told them that what they did didn't stop you, he said. Which means they'll try harder. She studied him. You know it was deliberate. I was 4 rows back with a direct line of sight to the wings, he said. I know exactly what happened. Who are you? Noah, he said. Just the name. No surname offered, none coming. What do you want, Noah? He looked at her steadily. I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. The gray morning light moved in slow pale planes across the studio floor. Nova looked at this stranger, this composed, uninvited, quietly certain man, and felt something she could not immediately name. Not fear, not comfort. Something between the two, uncomfortable and alert. I don't know you, she said. No, he agreed. So why would you concern yourself with what happens to me? He was quiet for a moment, not searching for an answer, deciding how much of it to give. I watched you last night, he said. Before it happened, standing in the wings. There was something in the way you were standing that I have never seen before. He paused. And then it happened. And you got up. And you danced better than you had any right to. And the people who did it stood in the wings watching you succeed and hating you for it. His jaw tightened barely. I do not enjoy watching things like that go unanswered. What does unanswered look like to you? Nova said carefully. It depends on what you want, he said. She walked to the bar. Not for balance, for a moment of ordinary movement in a conversation that had stopped feeling ordinary. I want to dance, she said to the window. That is all I have ever wanted. I came to this company. I learned this language. I rebuilt my body after an injury that should have ended my career. And all I want is to do the work. If whatever you're offering complicates that, I'm not interested. She turned back. I don't complicate things, he said. I simplify them. Every dangerous man I have ever heard of, Nova said, has said something very close to that. The almost amusement moved through his eyes, quick and controlled. He reached into his jacket and placed a card on the windowsill nearest the door. Not handed to her, simply placed, so the choice of picking it up was entirely hers. If anything happens, he said, call that number. I didn't say I would, Nova said. I know, he said. He did not turn around. But you might. He left. She listened to his footsteps move down the corridor with the same unhurried certainty with which they had arrived. And then the building was quiet again. The card sat on the windowsill like a small, patient question. She did not pick it up before she left 2 hours later. But she did not leave it behind either. The investigation Mr. Choi had promised lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, he called her back into his office and told her the footage was inconclusive. Adi's account had been accepted, and the matter was closed. She nodded. She left. She went to the small practice room on the 2nd floor, closed the door, and gave herself 60 seconds. 60 seconds of feeling everything she was not going to show anyone. The anger first, clean and hot. Then beneath it the older thing, the exhaustion of being extraordinary and still being told it was not enough. Then the 60 seconds ended and she went to the bar and she worked. The attacks did not stop. They became quieter, more precise. 3 weeks after the investigation, she arrived at rehearsal to find her point shoes tampered with. The shanks partially cut through on both pairs, clean incisions made with something sharp and thin, invisible until you put the shoes on and your weight came down. She discovered it mid-warm-up when her left shoe buckled, and she grabbed the bar to keep from going over on her ankle. She looked at the shoe for a long time. She thought about what Noah had said. They'll try harder. That evening she sat on the floor of her apartment with the damaged shoe in her lap and the card in her hand, and she looked at the number for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called. It rang twice. Yes, said Noah's voice. Calm, unhurried, as if he had simply been waiting. My point shoes were tampered with, she said. Someone cut the shanks. Both pairs. A brief silence with a decision in it. Are you hurt? No. Keep the shoes, he said. Are you home? Why? Because if you're home, you're safe tonight, he said. Get some sleep. I'll take care of the rest. What does that mean? It means focus on dancing, he said. And let me focus on everything else. I haven't agreed to that arrangement, she said. I know, he said. And the patience in his voice was so absolute, it was almost its own kind of pressure. But you called. She had no answer to that. Because he was right. Good night, Noah, she said. Good night, Nova, he said. She did not see him for 2 weeks. But she felt the edges of his presence. A security guard who now checked the corridor behind her with new thoroughness. A man at a cafe across the street who changed every few days, but whose table never went unoccupied during her hours in the building. Adiz noticed. Nova watched the calculation enter the familiar contempt, a new wariness layering over the old hostility. Adiz was recalibrating, trying to understand what had changed. Then the spring program was announced. Nova was assigned the principal role. The dressing room became a room with a slow gas leak. Nothing visible, nothing provable, but a toxicity in the air that made breathing slightly more effortful than it should have been on the Thursday night. Leaving the building late after an extended rehearsal, Nova pushed through the stage door and was 3 steps into the dark alley when someone grabbed her arm. She spun and pulled back in the same motion, a trained reflex, and found a man she did not recognize. Mid-30s Korean. He held a phone with a photograph on the screen. Her apartment door. Pretty place, he said in heavily accented English. Quiet neighborhood. Nova's heart hammered. Her face stayed still. Who sent you? He smiled. Not pleasantly. Someone who thinks you should go home. Back to Africa. Before something breaks that you can't fix. He let go of her arm. He stepped back. He walked away without hurrying, without looking back. Nova stood in the alley for 5 seconds. Then she called Noah. He answered on the first ring. Someone grabbed me outside the stage door, she said. Her voice was even. She was proud of how even it was. Korean man. He showed me a photograph of my apartment door and told me to go back to Africa. Are you still outside? Yes. Go back inside. Tell security to call the police if anyone approaches. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He was there in 8. She saw the headlights through the stage door window and then he was inside. Same dark suit, same composed face. But something in the atmosphere around him had shifted. a tightness in his shoulders she had not seen before. His eyes still calm, but the calm of something coiled rather than resting. He looked at her first. A quick, thorough assessment, checking for damage. "You're not hurt," he said. "I told you I wasn't." He grabbed your arm. "And then let go," she said. "I'm not hurt." He looked at the security guard. "You have cameras on this alley?" In rapid Korean. The guard nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." "I'll need the footage," Noah said. "Not a request." Nova looked at him. "You said you'd take care of the rest," she said. "Yes." Something got through. Something moved through his expression. Not frustration at her, she realized, but at himself. "Yes," he said. "It won't happen again." "I don't want you to put me somewhere else tonight," she said, preempting him. "I'm going home." "Your address was in that photograph," he said evenly. "Your building hasn't been checked. I have a property, a serviced apartment, empty, clean, secure. One night. That is all I'm asking." She held his gaze. "The address in writing before I get in any car." Something in his face shifted. The nearest she had seen him come to an unguarded expression. Not quite a smile, but the shape a smile makes when it is being carefully restrained. He took out his phone, typed, and her phone buzzed. She looked at the address. She looked at him. "All right," she said. The apartment was on the 23rd floor in Yongsan-gu, clean and well-furnished and carrying no personal presence except a single photograph on the shelf. A younger Noah with an older woman who had the same jaw and the same eyes, both squinting into mountain sunlight. Nova stood in front of it for a moment. Then she went to the refrigerator. It had been restocked. Mango and pawpaw alongside Korean fruit, and a sealed container of jollof rice that stopped her completely. Because jollof rice did not simply appear in a Yongsan-gu refrigerator. Someone had gone to the specific trouble of finding it, and the thought of Noah instructing someone to source jollof rice for the woman he was protecting made something shift quietly in her chest that she was not ready to examine. She ate. She slept, deeply, without the low-level vigilance she had been maintaining in her own apartment for weeks without fully admitting it. She stayed 3 nights, not 1. On the second afternoon, Noah appeared at the door. He knocked, which she noticed. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee from a place she recognized nearby. He held one out. "I thought you might want company. Or I can leave these and go." She looked at the coffee. She looked at him. "Come in," she said. They sat at the kitchen counter and drank their coffee, and the midday light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a few minutes neither of them said anything, which was, she noticed, not uncomfortable. "Tell me about the source," she said. He looked at his cup. "His name is Baek Sungo, a patron of the company. He funds 3 principal positions. Adiz is one of them. He promised her the principal role for the spring program before you arrived. Now the promise isn't being kept. So instead of accepting it, he's trying to change it. By scaring me out," Nova said. "Yes. Who is he to you?" she said. "Because you are not doing this from the goodness of your heart." He was quiet for longer than usual. "He and my father had a disagreement. Several years ago. It cost my family something that could not be replaced." He looked at her. "I have been waiting for the right reason to address it. His behavior toward you gave me one. So I'm useful to you," Nova said. "You were," he said. "That was the beginning. It is not what this is now." "What is it now?" He looked at her steadily. "I'm not sure yet, but I know the difference between a strategy and something else. And this stopped being a strategy a while ago." She held his gaze. "I need you to be honest with me about everything. What you're doing. What the risks are. Because I won't be managed, Noah." "I know," he said. "You are not someone who can be managed. You are someone who has to be respected." The words landed without decoration, and they landed precisely because of that. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. "I'll stay. For now. And you tell me everything that happens with Baek Sungo." "Yes," he said. "And no decisions about my life without telling me first." He considered this. "I'll tell you what I can. There may be things I cannot share fully. Not to hide them, but because information in my world carries costs I won't put on you." "Fair," she said. "But no surprises." "I'll do my best," he said. She picked up her coffee. It was good black, from the right place, ordered correctly, which meant he had noted it from something she had said once in passing. She drank it and looked at the city out the window and thought that she was in a very complicated situation with a very complicated man, and was, against every reasonable instinct, not afraid. Which was its own kind of warning. She approached Soo-yeon on a Wednesday evening, in the empty corridor outside the changing room, timing it deliberately. Late enough for privacy, casual enough not to seem planned. Soo-yun. Soo-yun stopped, turned, braced herself visibly. I'm not angry, Nova said. I want you to know that first. Soo-yun said nothing, but her shoulders dropped a fraction. I know you're scared, Nova said. I know it felt safer to lie than to tell the truth. I'm not asking you to go back to Mr. Choi. I'm not asking you to do anything that puts you at risk. She paused. I just need one thing. The point shoe incident. Was that Adiz alone, or was someone else involved? Soo-yun looked at her for a long moment under the flat corridor light. She looked young and exhausted, and like someone who had been carrying something she had not expected to be so heavy. There was a man, she said low and fast. He came to the building twice. Older, Korean, very well dressed. I saw him speaking with Adiz in the car park. The second time was the day before your shoes. Baek Sung-go. Thank you, Nova said. Nova. Soo-yun's voice caught slightly. I'm sorry. For what I said. For not. I know, Nova said. Be careful. She left Soo-yun in the corridor and went home. That evening she told Noah what Soo-yun had said. He listened without interrupting. Complete, unhurried attention, no part of him composing his response while she was still speaking. Baek Sung-go visited the building himself, he said when she finished. He's getting impatient. Impatient men make mistakes, Nova said. He looked at her with something new in his expression. A warmth that was different from the composed observation she had grown accustomed to, more direct and less guarded. Yes, he said. They do. He had taken to coming to her apartment in the early evenings. Not every evening. Sometimes days passed without contact, but often enough that the pattern had established itself quietly, without either of them naming it. He would arrive around 7, sometimes with food, sometimes without, and they would sit at the kitchen counter or, on warmer nights, on the narrow balcony overlooking the street, and they would talk. The conversations had changed since the first one. They had started careful and structured around the situation. Baek Sung-go, Adiz, Nova's safety. But something about shared evenings and coffee drunk while the city lights came on had loosened the structure gradually, the way warmth loosens a tightly tied knot. She learned things about him. That he read seriously and widely, with a preference for history and philosophy that surprised her slightly. That he had grown up in Busan and moved to Seoul at 22, and spoke about the city with the particular affection of someone who chose a place rather than was born into it. That he had 2 younger sisters he was at considerable pains to keep out of his world. That he had not eaten properly in 2 days, which she discovered when she mentioned she was going to cook and saw the expression cross his face. Quickly controlled, but unmistakably hopeful. She made a goosey soup. He sat at the counter and watched her cook with the composed attention he brought to everything, and she found, to her own surprise, that she did not mind being watched when it was him. He ate 2 full bowls without saying much about it. But he sat with his hands curved around the empty bowl long after he had finished, and that said more than commentary would have. There's something I want to do, Nova said from across the counter. He looked up. I want to talk to Adiz. No, he said. She looked back at him steadily. I wasn't asking your permission. I know, he said. I'm telling you my concern. If you approach Adiz directly, Baek Sung-go will know that you know about the connection. Right now he believes you're frightened and isolated. That assumption is an advantage. She considered it. It was a reasonable point. And if I approached Soo-yun instead of Adiz, I already did that. Yes, he said. And it gave us useful information and didn't reveal what we know. He paused. There's a difference between Soo-yun, who is scared and wants a way out, and Adiz, who is still embedded. Nova was quiet for a moment. What is Baek Sung-go going to do next? He'll apply pressure through the company, Noah said. He has enough financial leverage with the board to start pushing for a casting review. He's already laying the groundwork. You know this. Yes. How long do we have? Weeks, he said. Not months. She looked at him. Then we need to move first. He held her gaze. What are you thinking? You have something on Baek Sung-go, she said. The contract. What he did to your father's company. You've been holding it. Yes. If it comes out before he applies the board pressure, she said. He's dealing with a crisis instead of a strategy. A man managing a scandal cannot simultaneously manage a board. Noah was very still. I've been building toward releasing that information carefully, he said. If I move it too early. Is it ready? She said. A pause. Nearly. How nearly? He looked at her for a long moment. 2 weeks, he said. Maybe less. Then that's our window, she said. Something moved through his expression. The recalibration of someone encountering an idea through a door they had not known was there. You are not what I expected, he said. No one ever is, she said. The board moved first. Mr. Choi called Nova into his office on a Tuesday afternoon and told her, with the careful language of a man walking across uncertain ice, that the board had raised concerns about the spring program's principal casting and were requesting an open audition before the next scheduled run. An open audition. After the program had already opened. After the reviews. The audition would be scheduled for 3 weeks from now, he said. You would of course be included. She stood. 3 weeks, she said. Thank you, Mr. Choi. She walked out and stood in the corridor and breathed through her nose 3 times. Then she called Noah. Baek Sungo has gone to the board, she said. Open audition. 3 weeks. A silence. Where are you? The company building. Listen to me, he said. He moved faster than I expected. But this doesn't change anything. I'm going to release the information about what he did to my father's company. It's ready enough. Noah, she stopped. She had to say this carefully. If you interfere with the board directly, if you apply financial pressure the same way he did, and it comes out, it will look like I can't win without a man's intervention. It will undo everything. The silence that followed was longer than most. You're right, he said. Immediately. Quietly. She had not expected that. She had been braced for a reasoned argument. The clean, direct acknowledgement landed differently, and she stood in the corridor with the phone against her ear and felt something shift in how she understood him. So what do I do? She said. You audition, he said. And you win. I keep Baek Sungo from cheating while you do. Can you guarantee that? I can make it very clear to him personally, he said, that any attempt to influence the panel will cost him more than the result is worth. You're going to threaten him. I'm going to have a conversation, Noah said. The nature of it will do the rest. This opens the real thing between you and him, she said. The 15-year thing. I know. Are you ready for that? A pause. The pause of someone being fully honest with themselves before they speak. Yes, he said. I have been ready. I was waiting for the right moment. Be careful, she said. A beat of quiet. You said that to me, he said. Yes, she said. You've never said that before. I know, she said. The silence between them held something that neither of them reached for yet. But neither looked away from it either. I'll be careful, he said. She did not see him for 4 days. 4 days in which she was in the studio from 7 until 8 every evening, working with a focus so complete it felt like a physical state. Isabelle Laurent, who had stayed in Seoul through the program's run, came to watch on the second day and sat in the corner with her arms crossed and her head tilted at the angle Nova had come to recognize as Isabelle's expression for something exceeding her expectations. On the third day, Adiz found her on the pavement outside the company building. Nova did not stop walking. I know you know about Baek Sungo, Adiz said. Her voice was even, not hostile exactly, or rather the hostility was still there but layered now over something more complicated. Nova kept walking. Did you come to tell me something or to see how I'd react? Both, Adiz said. Nova stopped and turned and looked at Adiz fully for the first time in months. Not as a threat to manage, but as a person. What she saw surprised her. Adiz was afraid. Not of Nova. Of something larger. The fear of someone who got into a vehicle believing they knew the destination, and has only recently understood that the driver has taken a different road. He told me to push you, Adiz said. Low and fast. On the stage. I was angry enough to do it. I had my own reasons. But the instruction came from him. She paused. The shoes. I didn't know about the shoes until after. Nova looked at her steadily. Why are you telling me this? Because he asked me to do something else, Adiz said. Something I won't do. What? Adiz shook her head. It doesn't matter what. What matters is I'm done. Nova understood what that meant. The moment Baek Sungo understood that Adiz had withdrawn her cooperation, the patronage funding her position would not survive the rupture. Be careful, Nova said. Adiz looked at her. Not warmly, it was not that kind of moment, but with the particular acknowledgement that passes between two women who have been on opposite sides of something difficult and are only now seeing each other clearly. Then she walked away. Nova stood on the pavement and watched her go and thought about the strange, non-linear ways things resolve. Not cleanly, not with the satisfaction of everyone finding their proper place, but with the messy, particular humanity of people making different choices at different moments, and how those choices sometimes produce something that resembles, at least partially, justice. On the fourth evening, Noah appeared at her door. He came in and sat on the sofa, which he had never done before. He usually sat at the counter, in the practical daylight part of the apartment. The sofa was different, more personal. She sat in the chair across from him and waited. "I met with Baek Sungo," he said. "Yes," she said. "It did not go the way I planned." Before she could ask, "No one is hurt. But Baek Sungo has made alliances in the past year I was not aware of. Men I cannot simply apply pressure to. What does that mean for the audition?" "He still intends to try to influence the panel," he said. "And he told me," he paused. "He has someone inside my organization who holds information about my father's operations from before I took over. Information that could be constructed into a legal case." His jaw tightened. "Not against me. Against my sisters." The room went very quiet. Nova looked at him. At this man who had walked into her life with the absolute certainty of someone who had never encountered a problem he could not solve, sitting here now with the specific look of someone who has found the exact shape of his own limitation. Not danger to himself, she understood, but danger to the two people he had spent his entire adult life protecting. "How real is the threat?" she said. "Real enough," he said. "The information exists. My father was not careful in the early years. There are things that could be constructed into a case. Probably wouldn't succeed legally. But the process would be public. And my sisters," he stopped. "Are innocent," Nova said. "Completely." She leaned forward. "Then let me think with you," she said. He looked at her. The look of someone who has been asked what he wants rather than what he has decided, and does not quite know what to do with the question. "All right," he said. They talked for 2 hours. She curled her legs beneath her in the chair, and he sat on the sofa with his jacket over the armrest and his sleeves pushed to his elbows, and they went through it the way she worked through difficult choreography. Piece by piece, with attention to what each piece was actually doing. "The information about your father," she said. "Baek Sungo has held it for 15 years without using it." "Yes, because holding it and used is leverage," she said. "The moment he uses it, it becomes just information. He loses the threat." Noah looked at her. "Yes, so he won't use it unless he feels forced to," she said. "Which means the question is, what makes him feel forced?" She paused. "If the story about what he did to your father's company was already public, already out, already absorbed, then threatening to release your father's information in response doesn't change anything. The landscape has already shifted. He has nothing left to weaponize." Noah was completely still. "You get ahead of him," she said. "You release your information first. Before the audition. He responds with yours. And no one cares, because the story is already old news and your sisters' names are attached to nothing that actually holds." He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Pure, unguarded. The look of someone encountering an idea through a door they had not known existed. "You are extraordinary," he said. She looked at him steadily. "I know," she said. Not arrogance, the quiet, earned confidence of someone who has done the work. "So are you. Between the two of us we can figure this out." He held her gaze, and in the holding of it something moved in the space between them. Not a word, not a gesture, but a shift in the quality of the silence, an alteration in what it meant. She felt it. He felt it. Neither reached for it, but neither looked away. "Nova," he said, his voice very quiet. "Not yet," she said, just as quietly. He breathed. He nodded. The nod of someone who respects a boundary precisely because he understands what it is protecting. "Not yet," he agreed. The story broke at 11 on a Thursday night. She was at home in her training clothes, running the audition sequence in her mind, when her phone lit up with a news alert. Then another. Then several in quick succession. Different publications picking up the same story. A detailed and extensively documented account of financial sabotage carried out against a legitimate business 15 years ago. Names. Figures. Paper trails assembled with the thoroughness of someone who had been building the case for exactly this purpose for a very long time. Baek Sungo's name appeared in the 4th paragraph. Her phone buzzed. "Noah, it's done." She typed back, "I see it. Are you all right?" A pause longer than usual. Then yes. "Are your shoes ready?" She almost laughed. She pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling and thought about this man. This careful, quietly devoted, occasionally impossible man, who had just released the thing he had been holding for 15 years and whose first question was about her audition shoes. Nova, my shoes are ready. Noah, good. Get some sleep. Nova, you first. A pause. Then fair. She checked both pairs of point shoes, a habit she had not abandoned since October, and went to bed. The morning of the audition, she was in the studio at 6. She did not warm up frantically. She started at the bar and moved through her plies with patient attention and listened to her body the way a careful reader listens to a text, for what it was actually saying rather than what she wished it would say. Her knee was fine. Her technique was ready. Her mind was clear. She thought about Lagos, about the studio where she had trained from the age of 6, with its uneven floor and second-hand mirrors, and the teacher, Mrs. Okafor, elegant and precise, who had studied in London and come home to pass it on, who had told her at 11 years old, Nova, you have something that cannot be taught, but it can be wasted. Don't waste it. She had not wasted it. The panel assembled at 10. Mr. Choi, Isabel Laurent, and 3 external assessors brought in specifically to ensure impartiality, a stipulation Mr. Choi had quietly added after Soo Yun's amended statement reached the board and created significant institutional discomfort. 5 dancers auditioned. Nova went last. She walked to center floor. She stood in her opening position. She danced. She danced the way she had been working toward for 3 years. Not perfectly, because serious dancers use that word only ironically, but fully, with every technical instrument she had developed and every emotional truth she had earned, and with the particular freedom that comes when preparation has been so thorough it becomes invisible, and what remains is simply the thing itself. When the final position landed and the lights held, Isabel made a single sharp sound from the corner. Not quite a word. The sound a person makes when the world has briefly arranged itself correctly. The result was announced the same afternoon. Mr. Choi stood in the doorway of the waiting room and looked at Nova. The principal role remains with you, he said. Unanimously. She nodded. She said thank you. She kept her face composed until she was in the corridor with the door closed behind her and no one watching. Then she pressed her back against the wall, tilted her head back, and let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep, from the structural part of her that had been holding everything else up for months. She gave herself 60 seconds. All of it. The stage floor rushing up to meet her. The cut shoes. The man in the alley. The 4 days of not knowing. The 2 hours on the sofa working through a problem that had not been hers to solve, but that she had solved anyway, because that was who she was. The 60 seconds ended. She called Noah. He answered on the first ring. I kept the role, she said. The silence on his end lasted exactly long enough for her to understand that he had been waiting for this call. That whatever else he had been doing since the audition began, part of him had simply been waiting. Of course you did, he said. She laughed, slightly unsteady, which surprised her. She pressed her hand flat against the wall. Noah. Yes. Thank you, she said. Not for fixing it, you didn't fix it, but for making it possible to do it myself. A long quiet. That, he said, is the best thing anyone has ever said to me. She smiled at the wall. Don't let it go to your head. Impossible, he said. My head is already very full. I'll see you tonight, she said. Yes, he said. And then just before she could hang up, Nova. Yes. Well done, he said. Quietly. 2 words carrying exactly the weight they were meant to carry, and no more. She hung up. She pushed off the wall. She walked back toward the studio. Baek Sungo did not disappear overnight. Men like him never did. They were too deeply embedded in too many systems, too entangled with too many other interests, to be removed by a single news story, however well documented. What happened instead was slower and more institutional, and ultimately more durable than any dramatic confrontation would have been. The story Noah released moved through the financial press, and then the general press, and the investigations it triggered were formal and procedural and took months. Baek's patronage of the ballet company was quietly reviewed. 2 of the 3 board members connected to his network stepped back from their positions over the following year. It was not swift. It was not cinematic. But it was thorough. Adiz left the company at the end of the spring season. She had known from the moment she walked away from Baek Sungo's arrangement that the funding which had brought her here would not survive the rupture. She left for London, where where she had originally trained, and where another company had expressed interest. Nova heard about it from Isabel, who had heard it from the administrative office, and she sat with the information for a moment before filing it in the category of things that had resolved themselves without requiring a verdict. Not every ending needed to be clean to be final. Soo-yeon stayed. Her amended statement had created a difficult few months. The institutional awkwardness of someone who has corrected a significant lie in public is never comfortable, and there were people in the company who did not quickly forgive it. But she was a serious dancer and she kept showing up, and Nova, who understood the specific courage required to correct a wrong choice in front of people who watched you make it, gave her the same quiet space she would have wanted for herself. They were not close, but the civility between them softened gradually into something that, with patience, might eventually become more. Mr. Choi announced his retirement at the end of the year. In his letter to the incoming artistic director, he recommended Nova for a senior soloist position and wrote, at the end, that she was not only one of the finest dancers he had encountered in 30 years, but one of the most resolute human beings he had ever had the privilege of working with. She read the letter twice. She folded it carefully and put it in the small wooden box on her dresser alongside a photograph of her mother and the first pair of point shoes she had ever broken in. Spring turned to summer and summer to autumn, and the city changed around her in its usual indifferent way. The cherry blossoms and then their absence, the heavy heat and then the first cool breath of September. And through all of it she danced and worked and built the kind of career that is made not from single extraordinary moments, but from the accumulation of consistent, serious, excellent days. And through all of it Noah was there. Not always visibly. Not always announced. He was there the way certain things are there. The way good light is in a room, present and enabling, and only fully noticed when it changes. He was there on the mornings she cooked breakfast before 7 o'clock studio sessions, and on the evenings when the day had been long and she needed to sit in the same room as someone without being required to perform anything. And on the occasional afternoon when something in rehearsal had opened something older and deeper, and she needed to talk it through with someone who would listen with his particular, complete quality of attention. His world continued to be what it was. She had understood early on that she was not going to change it, and that trying to would be its own form of disrespect, a refusal to accept the full reality of who he was in exchange for a version she found more comfortable. So she chose instead to understand it as fully as he would allow, and he allowed her further in than she had anticipated, with an honesty that had its own risks and its own cost. There were difficult nights, weeks when the weight of what he carried sat visibly on him. A particular quality of silence, a tightness at dinner, the way he sometimes sat with his hands still for longer than usual while something worked behind his eyes that he was not yet ready to bring into words. On those nights she did not push. She offered presence instead of interrogation and learned that this was, for him, a form of care he had not had much practice receiving. He learned, slowly and with the particular stubbornness of a man who has built his entire self on self-sufficiency, to let her in. It was not smooth. It was the work of two people with very different architectures learning to occupy the same space without requiring the other to become someone else. And like all real work, it was sometimes difficult and sometimes exhausting and sometimes, increasingly as the months moved forward, profoundly, quietly right. He told her he loved her on a Tuesday in November. Not on a significant occasion. Not with ceremony. They were in her apartment, and she had just come back from an evening rehearsal, and she was making tea, and he was at the counter reading something on his phone. Just existing in her space with the comfortable unself-consciousness of someone who has long since stopped performing normalcy, and is simply practicing it. She set his cup down in front of him. He looked up from his phone. He looked at her for a moment the way he looked at everything that mattered to him, with total attention, without rushing. And then he said, with the same directness he brought to everything, "I love you." She looked at him. He put his phone down. He held her gaze with complete steadiness. Not performing it, simply inhabiting it, the composure of someone who has arrived at a truth through a long process, and is now stating it without decoration because decoration would only diminish it. She walked around the counter and stood in front of him and looked at him at close range. The jaw, the eyes, the careful stillness of a man who is waiting without demanding. "I know," she said. He raised one eyebrow very slightly. "I've known for a while," she said. "I was waiting for you to know it yourself." Something crossed his face. the full, unguarded expression she had learned to look for because it appeared rarely and was always worth waiting for. Not quite a smile, but holding a smile inside it, the way certain music holds a note before releasing it. "I love you too," she said. In case that wasn't clear. "It was becoming clear," he said. "I didn't want to assume." "You," she said, "assume everything." "Not this," he said. "Not you." She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. A gesture so simple and complete it required nothing else, no elaboration, no addition. He was very still under the touch, the way he was still under everything that mattered to him, giving it his full attention, making sure he did not miss a single detail. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay," he said. His sisters found out about her in December. Not about what he did. That conversation would come on its own timeline and at his choosing, and Nova had long since made her peace with that. But about her. About the woman their brother had apparently been spending a significant portion of his life with for nearly a year without mentioning it to anyone in his family. The older sister was named Jisoo. She called on a Sunday while Nova was in the apartment, and Nova could hear from across the room the particular tone of a sibling who has learned something secondhand that they feel strongly they should have learned firsthand. Noah handled the call with his usual composure and very few words. When he hung up, he turned to Nova with an expression that was the closest she had seen him come to sheepish. Subtle enough to require careful reading, but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. "Jisoo would like to meet you," he said. "I would like to meet Jisoo," Nova said. He looked at her. "You're not nervous?" "No," she said. "Are you?" He considered this with genuine seriousness. "Slightly," he said. She looked at this man, who negotiated with people who frightened other people, who had dismantled a 15-year injustice with the patience of someone simply waiting for the right key, and felt the smile before she could stop it. "Slightly nervous of your sisters," she said. "They have opinions," he said. "Strong ones. Loudly held." "I like them already," she said. The almost smile appeared. "I was afraid of that," he said. She met Jisoo and the younger sister, Jiyeon, 26, a graduate student in architecture who had the same jaw as Noah and significantly more observable emotions, at a restaurant in Mapogu on a Saturday afternoon. Noah sat beside Nova and across from his sisters and was for the first 30 minutes perceptibly tense in a way that only she could now fully read. A slight compression in his posture. The particular energy of someone who cares very much about two separate things existing in the same room for the first time. Jisoo was direct and warm and asked exactly the questions she wanted answered without any social softening. Jiyeon talked for 15 minutes about a bridge she was designing before apparently remembering this was a get-to-know-you lunch and pivoting, without embarrassment, to asking Nova about ballet with exactly the same intensity. Nova answered everything. Directly. Fully. Without performing. By the time the food arrived, Noah's posture had settled. Not completely. It never completely relaxed in public, which was something she had long since accepted. But enough. Enough that she felt the shift beside her, and she moved her hand under the table and put it over his once briefly, and felt his hand turn under hers and his fingers close around hers with a pressure that was quiet and total. Jisoo noticed. Nova watched her notice. The small calculation crossing her face, and then the thing that replaced it. Something warm and privately satisfied. The expression of a sibling who has worried about someone for a long time and has just received information that allows her to worry a little less. The lunch lasted 3 hours. When they left, Jisoo and Jiyeon heading toward the subway, Noah and Nova on the pavement in the December cold. Jiyeon turned back and said, with the directness of someone who has not yet learned to edit impulse, "Nova, I think you're really good for him. He laughed 3 times today. That's a lot." Noah looked at the sky. Nova pressed her lips together very hard. 3 times, she said. "I'll aim for 4 next time." Jiyeon beamed. Jisoo shook her head with the expression of a woman who loves her siblings and finds them equally exhausting. Then they were gone, into the subway entrance, and Nova and Noah were alone on the pavement with the December cold settling around them. She looked at him. 3 times, she said. "I'm aware," he said. He looked at her sideways, and the expression on his face was the full one, unguarded and warm and entirely his. And she thought she would probably never stop finding it worth waiting for. "Come on," she said. She put her arm through his and they walked, and the city moved around them, and the December lights came on in the shop windows as the afternoon darkened. And it was ordinary, and it was extraordinary, and it was both things at once in the way that everything real always is. There was one more test before the piece. It came in February from inside Noah's organization, and it came quietly the way the most dangerous things always do. Not with noise or drama, but with the particular stillness of a betrayal that has been carefully prepared. A man named Do-hyun, who had been with Noah for 6 years and who held a position close enough to the center of things to know things that mattered, had been passing information to a rival organization for 4 months. Not to Baek Sung-go. Baek was by now too exposed to be useful to anyone. To someone newer. Someone who had watched the events of the past year with interest and had decided that Noah's distraction, his attention split between his organization and the woman he was protecting, was an opportunity. Nova found out the same way she found out most things about his world. Not through a dramatic revelation, but through the accumulation of small details that, once you knew what to look for, pointed clearly in one direction. A conversation Noah cut short when she entered the room. A 3-day absence during which his messages were brief and functional and carried none of the particular quality she had come to recognize as him. A tightness in his jaw the evening he came back that was different from the usual tightness, more internal, the specific tension of someone managing something that has gotten closer than expected. She waited until they were alone. Something happened, she said. He looked at her across the kitchen counter. He was quiet for a moment, not deciding whether to tell her, she sensed, but how. Someone inside my organization was passing information, he said. It's been handled. How close did it get? She said. Close enough, he said. To you. To things that matter to me, he said. And the way he said it, with a deliberateness that made the words mean more than their surface, told her exactly what he meant. She looked at him. You should have told me. I didn't want you to worry, he said. Noah. She kept her voice even. We talked about this. No managing me. No deciding what I can and cannot handle. He breathed through his nose. You were preparing for the spring program. I didn't want to put this on top of that. That, she said, is you making a decision about my life without telling me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're right, he said. The same immediate, clean acknowledgement she had learned to watch for. The thing about him that had taken the longest to trust, and that she now trusted most completely. Is it over? She said. Yes, he said. Completely? Yes. She looked at him steadily. Then tell me what happened. All of it. He told her. All of it. He sat across the counter and laid it out with his usual precision. The timeline, the information that had been passed, the way he had identified the source, the way it had been resolved. He told her without drama and without softening, which was the only way she had ever wanted anything from him. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Are you all right? She said. He looked at her. Yes. Not strategically, she said. You. Are you all right? The question landed the way it always did when she asked it directly. With a slight alteration in his stillness, the adjustment of someone receiving something they have not fully learned to receive. It was someone I trusted, he said. After a moment. Quietly. That part is harder than the rest. I know, she said. She got up and came around the counter and sat beside him. Not across from him, beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, and she did not say anything else because there was nothing else that needed saying. She simply stayed there, present and steady, and after a moment she felt him exhale. Slowly, completely, the exhale of someone setting something down. They sat like that for a long time. Outside the window, the February city went about its business, indifferent and glittering, and inside the apartment the silence between them was the kind that holds rather than empties. The silence of two people who have stopped needing to fill space with proof of their presence, because the presence itself has become enough. The spring program's second run opened on a Thursday in late March. The Sejong Center was full again. Isabelle Laurent had returned to Paris after the first run, but had sent notes, 3 pages, single-spaced, in her compressed angular handwriting, that Nova had read twice and integrated with the thoroughness she brought to everything. Director Park, the new artistic director, had proved to be exactly what the company needed. Direct, serious, entirely uninterested in the politics that had characterized the previous administration, and entirely interested in making the work as good as it could be. Nova stood in the wings in her opening costume, deep burgundy, structured at the bodice, the skirt built for movement rather than display, and she let the music inside her head begin before the orchestra had lifted a bow. She thought about nothing, which was the luxury of someone who has prepared so thoroughly that preparation has become invisible, who no longer needs to think about the work because she has become the work, and what remains is simply to let it move through her. The curtain rose. She danced. She danced with everything she had built and everything she had survived, and with the particular quality that serious critics reach for unusual words to describe. Not just technical mastery, not just emotional depth, but the specific, rare thing that happens when both are present at once and neither is visible as a separate ingredient because they have become a single substance. The audience held their breath. She held them. When it was over and she stood in the closing position and the lights held for a single long beat before the applause broke, she felt, quietly, privately, beneath the roar of 2,000 pairs of hands, the thing she had crossed oceans for. She had done it, not despite everything. Through it. She bowed. She straightened. She walked off stage. And in the wings, where she had once been pushed to the floor by someone who had wanted her gone, she stopped and breathed the backstage air. Rosin and wood and stage makeup, and the warm, particular smell of a theater that has just been alive with work, and she let herself feel it without rushing past it. Her phone buzzed in her bag. Noah, 4th row left. When you're ready. She found him where he always was. The house lights were up and the audience had cleared, and he was standing in the 4th row with his hands loose at his sides and his expression, as always, composed. She walked down the aisle toward him, and he watched her come the way he always watched her, with that quality of attention that she had come to think of as specifically, irreplaceably his. Complete. Unperformative. The attention of someone for whom she was simply and entirely the most important thing in the room. She stopped in front of him. Well, she said. Extraordinary, he said. One word. But she had learned by now that one word from him carried more weight than paragraphs from most. She looked at him. The house lights were warm above them, and the empty auditorium spread out behind her. 2,000 seats and a stage that had been, not so long ago, the site of the worst professional moment of her life. And that was now, irrevocably and permanently, the site of something else entirely. I want to stay, she said. In Seoul. Permanently. I want to negotiate a long-term contract with Director Park. Yes, he said. I'm telling you, not asking you. I know, he said. I said yes because it's the right decision. And because, he paused. The small pause that meant he was choosing the most honest version. Because I would very much like for you to stay. Is that you asking me? She said. He breathed through his nose. It might be, he said. She looked at him for a moment. I'm staying, she said. And Noah, whatever comes next. The next problem, the next person who decides to apply pressure in some direction. I'm not going anywhere. Not because I can't leave. Because I'm choosing not to. He held her gaze for a long time. In the way he held everything that mattered. With total attention, without rushing, giving the moment the full weight it deserved. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. He reached up and tucked a loose strand of her braid behind her ear. The first purely tender gesture she could remember from him, small and deliberate and unlike anything else in the composed vocabulary of how he moved through the world. It landed in her chest like something aimed there very precisely. She let him. The proposal did not come with grandeur. It did not come with a restaurant reservation or a crowd of witnesses or any of the staged architecture that proposals are sometimes given. It came the way most real things came between them. Quietly, without announcement, on an ordinary evening that had not been designated for anything significant. It was a Saturday in April. The spring air had finally arrived with genuine warmth after a long, reluctant winter, and the city outside Nova's apartment windows had the particular energy of a place shaking itself loose from cold. People moving faster on the pavements, the Han River catching the late afternoon light in long silver ribbons, the smell of something green and new coming in through the window she had left slightly open. She had danced that morning. She had come home and showered and made rice and stew, and Noah had arrived sometime around 2 with the unannounced ease of someone who had long since stopped needing to announce himself, and they had eaten together at the counter and then moved to the sofa. And now it was early evening, and she had her legs tucked beneath her reading a book she had been neglecting for 3 weeks, and he was beside her doing nothing in particular. Just present, just there, in the way he had become simply and thoroughly part of the texture of her days. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Nova." She looked up from her book. He was looking at her, not with the composed assessment she had first known from him, not with the strategic calm of a man managing a situation. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her since November, since the evening at the counter when he had finally said the words, with the full, unguarded openness of someone who has stopped protecting himself from the thing he wants. "I want to marry you," he said. Not, "Will you marry me?" Not a question waiting to be answered. A statement of what he wanted, laid between them honestly, the way he laid everything, without decoration, without performance, with the absolute directness of someone who has decided that the most important moments deserve the most honest language. She looked at him. She looked at the man who had walked into her studio uninvited on a gray October morning and changed the entire landscape of her life, who had placed a card on a windowsill and waited without demanding, who had sat on her sofa for 2 hours working through a problem that was not his to solve because she had asked him to think with her, and he had understood immediately what that meant, who had said "you're right" when she needed him to, and "I'll do my best" when that was the most honest answer, who had loved her the way serious things are loved, not loudly, not with performance, but with consistency and sacrifice and the daily, deliberate choice to show up, who had, on a Tuesday in November, said 3 words over a cup of tea on an ordinary evening and meant every syllable of them down to the bone. "I want that too," she said. He reached into his jacket. She had not even noticed he was still wearing it, which was how ordinary the moment felt, how untheatrical, and produced a ring. Small, precise, a single stone set in dark metal that caught the evening light coming through the window and held it quietly. No excess, no ostentation. Exactly him. He held it out to her, not slipping it onto her finger without asking, holding it out, offering it, so that the final movement was hers. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She held out her hand. He put the ring on her finger with the same careful attention he brought to everything that mattered to him, and then he held her hand in both of his and looked at it for a moment. Not performing the moment, simply being inside it, the way she had learned he inhabited everything he genuinely cared about. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay," he said. And that was the proposal. No crowd. No spectacle. 2 people on a sofa on a Saturday evening in April with the spring air coming through the window, saying the truest things they knew how to say in the simplest language available. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was exactly right. They were married 2 months later on a Saturday in June, in a garden in Busan that smelled of sea air and early summer, and the particular warmth of a day that had decided to cooperate fully. Ji-yeon cried before the ceremony started and did not pretend otherwise. Jisoo did not cry during the ceremony, but was observed by several people pressing her lips together very hard at a specific moment near the end, which everyone who knew her understood was the equivalent. Director Park attended and sat beside Isabelle Laurent, who had flown in from Paris and who spent most of the reception in animated conversation with the director about a collaboration that would eventually produce one of the most talked-about contemporary ballet works of the following season. Nova's mother had flown in from Lagos 4 days early and had spent those 4 days feeding everyone in the vicinity and periodically holding her daughter's face in both hands and saying nothing, which said everything. Noah stood at the front of the garden and watched Nova walk toward him across the grass in a dress the color of warm cream, her braid wrapped and pinned with small gold pieces that caught the light, and his face, which had been composed for as long as anyone in that garden had known him, was simply, entirely open. The face of a man receiving something he had not known how to ask for, and is only now fully understanding is real. She reached him. She stood in front of him. He took her hands. "Hi," she said quietly, because she could see that he needed something simple and real at that specific moment, and she was by now very good at knowing what he needed. "Hi," he said, and something in the single syllable. The quality of it, the way it carried everything he had spent years not saying and was saying now, made Ji-yeon start crying again, made Jisoo press her lips together considerably harder, and made Nova's mother close her eyes briefly and exhale in a way that suggested she had been waiting a long time for her daughter to find something worth exhaling about. The officiant began. They said what needed to be said. They meant every word of it. Afterwards there was food and music, and Ji-yeon made a speech that went 11 minutes longer than planned, and was entirely worth every second, and Nova's mother danced at a point in the evening when the music shifted to something that required it, and Noah, who did not dance, who had made this clear early and firmly, stood at the edge of the garden and watched his wife move through the evening with the quality of attention he had always given her, which had not diminished by a single degree. In the months and years of knowing her, but had only deepened, the way rivers deepen as they move further from their source. She found him there later, when the crowd had thinned and the garden lights were the only illumination, and the sea air had come in fully off the water, cool and salt-edged and clean. She stood beside him and looked out at the garden, at Jisoo talking to her mother, at Jiyeon laughing at something Director Park had said, at the small lit tables scattered across the grass where people who loved them had gathered to mark this particular day. "Are you happy?" she said. He looked at her, the full expression, unguarded and warm and entirely his. "Yes," he said, simply, without qualification. She leaned into him and felt his arm come around her, and she looked out at the garden and thought about everything that had led to this. The stage floor and the spotlight and the fall, the card on the windowsill, the 60 seconds alone in the empty corridor, the 2 hours on the sofa, the cut shoes and the man in the alley and the audition and all the mornings at the bar and all the evenings at the counter and all the quiet, ordinary, extraordinary days accumulated between a terrible moment on a stage and this particular evening in a Busan garden with the sea coming in and the people she loved gathered in the warm summer dark. She had not gone home. She had stayed. She had danced. She had built something real in a city that had tried, more than once, to make her believe she did not belong in it. And beside her, solid and present and entirely himself, complicated and careful and quietly, thoroughly devoted, was the man who had watched her get up from the floor and had known, in that still moment in the 4th row, that she was not someone you looked away from. She was not sorry about any of it. Not the fall. Not the fear. Not the long, difficult road that had wound through all of it to arrive here. Because the fall had only been the beginning. And this garden, this man, this life she had chosen and fought for and built with her own hands. This was what came after. And that is the end of Nova and Noah's story. Thank you so much for staying until the very last word. If you made it this far, you already know this story had everything: betrayal, danger, sacrifice, and a love that was earned through every single moment of it. But now I need to hear from you. Did the Mafia boss go too far? He inserted himself into Nova's life before she ever asked him to. He made decisions, he applied pressure, he moved pieces on a board she didn't know she was standing on. Was that protection, or was it control? And what about Nova? She stayed in a city that tried to break her. She trusted a man the world would call dangerous. And she fought for her dream without asking anyone to fight it for her. Did she make the right choices? What moment hit you hardest? Was it Nova getting up from that stage and dancing anyway? The night they sat on the sofa and she said, "Not yet"? The Tuesday he said, "I love you" over a cup of tea? Or the garden in Busan where he just said, "Hi"? Drop everything in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know exactly what you felt. If this story moved you, if it kept you up, if it made you feel something you weren't expecting, please like this video, share it with someone who loves a story that earns its ending, and subscribe to Sarang Noir Stories so you never miss what comes next. Nova and Noah are done, but we are just getting started.